Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
Not everything has to be this monumental shift in order for you to effectively deal with your stress. I think that's critical into understanding stress, is that it is something we can control mostly and in a large part, but we have to be able to, again, identify it, understand more about it, and want to do something about it.
Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan and this is my friend and co-host Danelle.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Oh, it might not be afternoon. It could be morning. Well,
could be morning.
Good, whatever part of the day you're listening to this.
Of the day. Yes. Today, you've picked a good one to visit us because we're talking about more Enneagram topics. Mm-hmm. So why do we do that? We always talk about, well, no, we don't. We don't always talk about the Enneagram. We get asked most from our listeners to talk more about the Enneagram because people who are really just dipping their toe into it, it really doesn't matter if they're just getting started or if they're like us and they've been studying it for years. There's always something new you can learn when we talk about, or anybody talks about the Enneagram.
Yes, I would say it's more accurate to say we reference it all the time.
All the time.
But we frequently have episodes to where we're talking about different topics, and it's because we know our listeners, a lot of our listeners are aware of their Enneagram number. It's a good way to almost individualize a common topic. So in this particular instance, we're going to talk about dealing with stress. So we find it very helpful to our listeners, and our listeners certainly find it helpful that when we talk about stress, that we're not just talking about it in general terms. Mm-hmm. We're attempting to individualize it a bit more. And so if you haven't taken the Enneagram test, we can't recommend it enough. We'll put our link in the show notes to the version that we recommend. We have a lot of you talking to us, but maybe you had taken the free one and now you've made the investment, the $12. Yes, I said that right. Ladies and gentlemen, $12, a fantastic investment that you can make in yourself. But the paid version is much more in depth. And so we'll put that out there for you. But that's why we continue to do episodes where we highlight a particular topic and then we discuss it by Enneagram type.
You know what I love about that Enneagram price tag of $12 is we've been saying that for a long time. And it's maybe one of the one things that hasn't been impacted by inflation. And on that note, let's jump to commercial.
As leaders, the time we have throughout the day is our most prized asset. At DMA, we work to save you time by doing marketing work that keeps you productive and focusing where your time is most needed. Right now, we're offering press release writing services to make sure that your news is shared with the right audience. As part of our service offering, we not only write and distribute the press release for you, we also follow up with key writers and editors to make sure your news is published. Once we're finished, we send you a full detailed report outlining the publications and audiences your press release reached. It's as simple as that. If I can help you or someone you know with press release writing, distributing, and publishing, look no further. Contact me, Lauren Miller, at info@dma-solutions.com.
Okay, so why is this topic today important? And what we're talking about specifically is how Enneagram types deal with stress. So no matter what you are on the Enneagram, no matter who you are, you live with stress. Mm-hmm. What we're going to talk about is what are we going to do? Because we're all so unique. How do we deal with it? We've all got varying personalities and fortitude to manage the stress. We thought it would be helpful to share our observations on how the different Enneagram types tend to deal with stress.
Yep.
What do we need to know about stress?
Well, first and foremost, you said it, but we cannot, I almost said stress it enough. We cannot mention it enough, but that we all have it. We all are going to experience it, and no matter how prepared we are to deal with it when it comes our way, it's just inevitable. And so instead of just sitting with it, when we understand it a bit more, we should be able to deal with it more effectively. And so what we need to start off knowing about stress is it's a hormonal response from the body. So we're going to go a little scientific here, but is that this response all starts with the part of your brain cell called the hypothalamus.
Mhm.
When you're stressed, the hypothalamus sends signals throughout your nervous system and to your kidneys. In turn, your kidneys release stress hormones. This includes adrenaline and cortisol. And so actually, these are things that we've mentioned a few times before, because in my therapy, I'm learning lots about this particular aspect of how our minds and our bodies are correlated in healthy ways, and in this case, in not so healthy ways. And so what we also need to know about stress is it's absolutely can increase how often you get sick. So it can just cause damage to your immune system.
Mhm.
And there's several studies out there that stated that psychological stress weakens your immune system's ability to fight infection. One of the authors state that they found that chronic stress could affect several immune factors, increasing your risk of various physical and mental conditions, including diabetes and certain cancers. Meaning the stress not only impacts our external, our internal feelings at the moment, or our body's function, but then over time, it can cause these health-related diseases. It can be the catalyst in many cases, or certainly it can be contributors to stress, can contribute to those sicknesses. What you also, like, if you're like, when do I know that I'm stressed? There's feelings that you should easily be able to identify. So for some of us, it can be that our hands start to shake. For some of us, we have a knee that's constantly bopping up and down, with our feet. It can be an eye twitching, For me, sometimes I clench my jaw. And if you've been around me enough, if you know I'm feeling stressed, you can actually see the muscle in my jaw going back and forth. And then I can also feel it sometimes in my lips. So there's just this,
Wow.
and if you pay attention, you realize it. And my shoulders go up. And again, working with the type of psychologist that I'm working with, the therapist that I'm working with, she's taught me how to identify some of these things, and I didn't even realize it. So and then obviously stress it's a link to digestive issues such as IBS. So upset stomach in a big way, that's what stress looks like. So again, there's internal, and then there's these external physical characteristics that, I don't know if they're called characteristics, but really behaviors that are happening when you're dealing with stress. So paying attention to those things is what I would almost call a step one, because you need to know that it's happening. And sometimes what I've learned too is that sometimes I'm feeling stress and I don't even realize it. And what it is for me, a lot of the times it's me battling a future circumstance, or a future, what some would call future tripping. So I may be relaxed, be in my apartment, enjoying a sunset, having a beautiful glass of wine. But when I start to feel these little triggers inside of me, that could be an upset stomach, that could be a number of things. I'm like, why am I dealing with stress right now? This is nice. What I'm experiencing is nice, but what I'm usually doing is thinking about something in the future. How is that going to go? Or what's going to happen if you fill in the blank? So those are just some things that I think we need to start off with in terms of characterizing stress before we dive into dealing with it by Enneagram type.
Yeah. And I mean, you're really underlining the point here that stress affects our health.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it does it in 3 different ways. It hits our body, it hits our heart, and it hits our head from an impact perspective. And so how we're going to organize what we're going to talk about today is going to be that way by body, heart, and head by Enneagram type, because we're all different. And what that I thought that was interesting that you just mentioned that future, what did you call it?
Future tripping.
Maybe that is something that 7s deal with. Maybe that's something that multiple Enneagram types deal with. But if that is, maybe people just don't even know that that has to do with their personality type.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's, and maybe my experience as a 9 is completely different. So that's what we're here to do today, to talk about those types of examples that Danelle just mentioned and how they destructive habits that we have on ourselves. We just can't help it.
Mm-hmm.
And then constructive habits that we can do by Enneagram type that we can put into motion to help us manage the stress.
Yeah, because the bottom line is, as people, the fact is that we are going to succumb to the effects of stress.
Yes.
So it's going to be there. And so learning to manage it, well, first of all, learning to identify it, learning to manage it, which would also mean to combat it, is critical. And I think this is something that we've kind of ignored as a culture, or at least for certain generations. And I think that, for those of us, it was like talking about stress was not something we did. We just powered through it, right? Like you just get over it. And so as we become a lot more aware of the impact that stress can have on our bodies and our mental state, there's a lot more tools out there and reference points to help us, which I'm extremely grateful for, because the only way I knew to deal with stress, exercise and probably, wine. So I needed a few more things in my toolbox, clearly, to deal with the stress that I was either feeling with the business or in my personal life. And so I really appreciate what we're going to share today, because it was very helpful for me, not just for my own Enneagram type, but for those in my life. And again, we cannot stress enough when you're looking at the Enneagram that all the numbers matter and should matter to you because of the relationship. You're not just... You have a dominant number, but you also have your 2 wings, and then you have numbers where you go in growth and where you go in stress. So paying attention to those numbers as it relates to your dominant type is important, but then also because if you're doing the Enneagram and you're utilizing it the most effective way, you understand what other people in your life, what their numbers are as well. So that is how we derived this particular episode.
Very helpful. All right. We're going to start, as we always do, with a peacemaker, which is type 9, which I am also a type 9. Usually you will read or talk through me, like type 9, but I thought I'd turn the tables today. So I'm going to talk about type 9 and you're going to talk about type 7 when we get to it.
Okay, good.
So starting with type 9, let's talk about destructive habits that we all feel as 9s. From a body perspective, 9s tend to forget themselves with lack of self-care and generally can become inattentive to their own needs. Constructively, dealing with stress, 9s take time for more self-help. They become more active and aware of what's going on with their bodies and sense what the body needs and wants. Now, this is something I've had to learn. What does this mean? In stress, we're talking about specifically today, I have the eye twitch. You have to you cannot ignore those things. You have to become very aware of those things in your life. From a heart perspective, destructively, we can be very passive aggressive. And these behaviors mask what's really going on that is stress related or inducing. And because of avoidance, 9s deal with a lot of anxiety and stress that builds over time. On the constructive side, we want to try to get in touch with anger that we're feeling as 9s and understanding the why behind the anger, because this puts the 9 in a powerful position to solve the problem causing the stress versus a passive. We talked about before. So encouraging 9s to express what they want and dial up the communication on their emotions, which they are typically uncomfortable doing. From a thinking perspective, the mind tends to focus on mindless tasks. It's called, I like to call it numbing out, to stay distracted from priorities, losing our agendas by merging with others' opinions. It's like a chameleon. And it's a scary trait. But on the constructive side of that, allow for compliments. This is what 9s are recommended to do. Allow for compliments and recognition of achievements. Notice the beliefs that they have that have support, that support the idea, I'm not important. You don't want to hear that. And that is a lot of the time what nines think. So the opposite of that would be, I am important. What I have to say is important, and how I feel is important.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to type 1, our reformers. So relative to the body and stress, they tend to be self-critical, contain their anger, and lack self-care, creating increased internal pressure, resulting in the body tension and physical rigidity. So to combat that with constructive habits, one should commit to regular movement or exercise that can help discharge negative energy and stress. And they should seek calming experiences in nature to ground themselves in serenity. So serenity now. All right. And relative to the heart and stress, negatively, they try to over-control emotions, including positive feelings such as appreciation, gratitude, and joy, so they can ignore those things. And this can lead to an inability to relax and be re-energized by pleasurable experiences. And so to combat that, they need to have a greater empathy for the mistakes they make and that others make. And remember, we always say the ones have that inner voice that is so critical, first and foremost, of themselves, but then also can be of others. So they need to focus more so on good enough versus perfection, and actively practice compassion for themselves. And what we would say, dear ones, is especially when things get hard, appreciate yourself for your efforts and good intentions, even if the outcomes aren't exactly as you have planned. And I'm quite certain that the ones listening, at least in our world, would acknowledge that as being what needs to be done for sure. So relative to the head, ones have a tendency to meet exceedingly high expectations and be overly responsible, leading to overworking to the point of pure exhaustion. In addition, mental pressure increases as critical thought loops of perceived mistakes or imperfections cannot be managed. So again, it's just this constant, what Doc would call ruminating. And so ones, and again, I know this firsthand because 7s go to 1 in stress. So all of this speaks to me and other 7s as well, but it's called ruminating, and you just sit in this negative loop, and the voice is really loud. So it's hard to shake. So what do we need to do, or ones need to do to combat that, is to allow for containment of work stress through thoughtful intention, to refining processes and making routines. So we know that the ones in our organization, they have lists, they have things, and that brings them great comfort and this is for that reason. And so they also need to plan for fun as well as opportunities for relaxation to guard against thinking too much. It's like, give your mind a break.
Right. And it's so interesting because 1s in growth go to 7, and 7 is the enthusiast. So that point about plan for fun is important for 1s.
Absolutely.
Okay. Type 2, the helper. So from a body perspective and destructive habits they tend to have, they take on tasks to meet the needs of others regardless of their energy level, which in return increases stress for them. They tend to have a hard time asking for help or recognizing or attending to their own physical needs. On the more positive side, in terms of what they can do, they may find themselves taking a time out from work to do something else. So from a leadership perspective, I'm hearing this because I see this in 2s. They just need to disconnect. I get it. They practice healthy affirmations regarding their body image and appearance, and listen closely to their bodies to help discern their needs or provide self-care. For their hearts, destructively, they find themselves irritated with others' perceived lack of performance or consideration for others. They may overwork in an attempt to please people and to be important and to receive praise. Interesting. On the more constructive side of things, from the heart, they should ask trusted colleagues to be a sounding board to delegate and diffuse stress together. So not alone, but together. When they seek appreciation from others, healthy 2s appreciate themselves first. So they really take a step back from worrying so much about others, and they look at themselves. For the head, stress twos tend to stop listening by deflecting input from others when they think they know best. They have a hard time receiving positive input and support, and sometimes they fake it till they make it by putting on a happy face so that they are giving off a positive vibe and then thus affirmed by others. Affirmation for them is very important from others. On a healthier side, constructively, when in doubt, they get back to basics and break big challenges into bite-sized pieces, which we talk a lot about here at DMA.
Mm-hmm.
They also actively generate positive inner dialogue about their value and their image and their strengths. So they really reward themselves with affirmation.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the type 3, the achiever. So relative to the body, in stress, 3s have a tendency to overwork to the point of complete energy depletion or exhaustion. They have a high tolerance for anxiety that can bring on illness or mental and emotional fatigue. So they can handle a lot. But that doesn't mean that they need to. So, and constructively, 3s should try to unplug and find nature to slow their pace. So I think they struggle with it because it is something they can handle maybe a little bit easier than some others. But again, ignoring it is they're still causing harm to their bodies. And so moving on to the heart, the things that it can be destructive is they have trouble moderating the speed of life, working at a high speed most of the time. They tend to numb feelings that might signal distress or overwhelm, and they become very impatient if something blocks their progress toward reaching goals. So in terms of what they need to do to combat that, in the matters of the heart, 3 should focus on creating and tending to relationships with deeper connections. When this goes well, 3s will find themselves consciously connecting with themselves and others, thereby accessing their emotions, which is necessary. A lot of times our stress can stem from the fact that we're not communicating how we feel, or we're not even thinking about it or dealing with it. And I know 3s struggle with that. Relative to the head, stress tends to lead them into a tendency to overfocus again on work and over-index on success, like completely avoiding failure. So it's success is, they just have this pursuit that is good in so many ways, but can easily, again, be a derailer to this particular Enneagram type. Ultimately, their belief in the need to achieve and cultivate specific image supports a lack of awareness and deeper values. So they tend to care about more of how they're showing up and what they're being seen as versus what's really, tending to what's on the inside. So in order to combat that, 3s can really evaluate their goals and plans to identify what's important rather than focusing on what is most effective or productive.
That interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And I don't know a lot of 3s, but I know a lot of 6s, and 6s go to 3 in stress. And so this makes a lot of sense to some of the things that they deal with. So,
okay, now moving into type 4, the individualist. When under stress, the 4s tend to not prioritize their physical needs. They can be overindulgent in comfort food and skip workouts when taken over by their emotional state. Because remember, 4s are very driven by emotions. On the constructive side of things, from the body's perspective, 4s can manage stress by getting active to help them vent their emotions. There's a lot of that in this lesson today, in this episode, about activity and how that relates to health. Breathing is important for all Enneagram numbers, and 4 especially, as emotional stress can lead to body tension. That breathing can help. I love that one. For the heart, they have a tendency to be self-critical and self-deprecating, which does in fact increase stress and decreases positive outlets for countering stress. On the constructive side, 4s would do well to develop gratitude practices, making lists of things that bring them joy and happiness to their life in the here and now. Friendships are important to 4s and can be the catalyst that they need to snap out of a stressful rut. Head, on the destructive side, their general sense of inadequacy fuels a focus on negative thinking and self-sabotage. Their mental focus on what's missing can increase stress. So constructively, 4s can work on projects that allow for self-expression and creativity. This type should notice, interrupt, and challenge negative beliefs they have about themselves that keep them focused on inner doubt and inadequacy, thus helping them see the good parts of their life.
Absolutely. All right, type 5 are investigators. So with the body destructively in stress, 5s has a tendency to adopt a scarcity mindset, which limits their willingness to access basic resources like food and water, which is a bit scary. They also tend to isolate themselves when under stress and when they need people the most. What's also, so diving into the 5s, 8s pay attention because here's where you go in stress. So constructively, what 5s should do is they should exercise to move the body and move out of the head. So they share that in common with 1s as well. So again, I think you're going to find a lot of constructive behavior relating to exercise, movement, and nature. So I think that's a common theme. But keeping that in mind, relative to the heart, destructively, 5s are able to cut people off emotionally by hoarding and being just completely, utterly private. And so what they need to work on to overcome this is it's recommended that 5s create opportunities for making connections that are also supportive. Because 5s they can make connections, but a lot of times it's very cerebral. It's
Right.
And so what they're saying here is making an attempt to make more meaningful connections is healthy for the 5. Relative to the head, they have a tendency to compartmentalize, rationalize, and withdraw, which prohibits them from recognizing people problems so they can be addressed properly. So to combat this, 5 should try sharing more information than you feel comfortable sharing to reduce stress and promote understanding of your insights and ideas. So making sure that you're conscious of sharing your thoughts and emotions with others so that you can release some of that and not be so isolated in your pursuits.
That's a good one. Okay, type 6, the loyalist. In stress, so on the destructive side, 6s tend to overfocus on thinking and planning, which leads to not being in the body or taking care of the body, which in turn limits their access to their gut instincts. Interesting. On the constructive side, 6s should get out of their head and into their gut when in stress by mindfully acknowledging instinctive responses. Commit to routines, including exercise and breathing. Feel your strength, dear 6, meaning trust yourself. I say that at home a lot. My husband is a 6.
Well, and then also you're a 9, so you go to 6 in stress, so this must be helpful for you as well.
It is. It certainly is. From the heart perspective, they just tend to be contrarian thinkers, which can be destructive by nature. In times of stress, they tend to go against others when it's not necessary. And that can create divisions in relationships. I can say wholeheartedly that is true. On the constructive side, partner with someone you trust to talk through vulnerabilities, fears, and concerns. Generate positive emotions through visualizing opportunities and seeing good outcomes in the future, dear 6. For the head, 6's self-doubt leads to self-sabotage and analysis paralysis, can lead to avoidance of taking action. All of this leads to excessive worry, paranoia, and anxiety, which all, of course, increase stress. So, for the head on the constructive side for 6s, we recommend you create a journal of all the things that went right today and leave out what didn't. Don't even think about what didn't work out. Practice supporting others by looking for and commenting on what's positive about their lives. So pass it on. Do it for yourself and pass it on.
All right. Type 7. So obviously I'll talk probably in the first person relative to this. So in stress, 7s tend to flit from one thing to the next without accomplishing anything. They also tend to be distracted and ignore things that need to be done because they take too much energy or seem boring or slow. In stress, we love to move at a rapid pace. So what we need to do to combat that is exercise can discharge excess energy for 7s. And I think anyone who knows me knows that that's extremely important. Practicing breathing patterns and lowering speech patterns can also help with stress. Meditation and yoga are recommended to shift attention from the head to the body. So really getting out of our minds, and instead of being in a denial state, we need to almost sit with it and own it through exercise, breathing, meditation, etc. So looking at the heart, looking at the heart relative to destructive behaviors is we can overschedule social activities like happy hours, dinners, lunches, and we tend to distract from difficult feelings or truths. 7s tend to avoid emotions they fear will be uncomfortable or painful, and this is honestly for others and themselves. They can often create more stress by failing to address the problems they have with people in their lives. I can wholeheartedly say that is accurate. And what we need to do, 7s, we should live in the present and be aware of underlying anxiety and restlessness. We need to focus on expressing gratitude for simple things and what's present versus in the future, or what can seem exciting or stressful. We need to learn to express wider feelings with people that we trust. Relative to the head and stress, 7s can be wrapped up with too many options and ideas, which leads to their mind staying too active to the point of keeping them up at night. For 7s, thinking speeds up when they are stressed, which leads to more stress. And again, it's a loop. And when you realize it, you can be in it and not even know that it's happening. And so what we need to do to combat that is we need to learn to sit quietly and meditate when in stress, and to improve the ability to focus and concentrate. We need to break tedious tasks down into practical steps. Think about both, what's going well and what is not, and stay balanced and do our damnedest to stay in the present. So in a previous episode, we had mentioned, and we're recording on it in the same time frame, but I've been in New York City for 6 months now. And so a lot of this constructive recommendation for the 7s are things that I've had to do and I've wanted to do in this season of my life with so much change preceding this move. And I can really tell you, dear 7s out there, and for those who have a deep relationship with this particular number, I'm seeing the positive effects of it. It takes time to, break loose of some of those habits. And I would say this for any of the numbers, but when you're really practicing these things, I will tell you, as someone who's going through it and still on the journey, that I can really see a difference. And I know that others are seeing it in my life that are in my life as well. So I just wanted to make that point.
It's interesting that you said that, because I think New York has been a good location, like a good geographical area for you to practice these things.
Which
I really do.
A bit, you would not necessarily think so, because there's so many distractions. The city is a distraction. It's just learning how to be in it in a way that is, again, more constructive for me. And, I kind of pride myself in having found ways to do that. And I look forward to others as well. So
Thank you. Okay. And moving into our final, which is type 8, the challenger. So from a body perspective and destructive habits and stress, 8s find themselves engaged in too much of what's not good for them, which could be eating, drinking, working, or shopping. They have a tendency to work long hours without sensing even their own limits. So it's just almost robotic. We use that word around here a lot. From a constructive perspective in stress, 8s should help their bodies by finding time for rest and relaxation, or engaging in activities that are not so intense. They tend to crave intensity. So what if you did the opposite of that? For the heart and destructive in stress, 8s have a hard time registering weakness or vulnerability that might bring attention to softer emotions or the need for going easy on themselves or others. Most often, the signal of stress is when they seem to lack empathy or come off as insensitive. So on the constructive side of the heart, Register underlying feelings that help you acknowledge limits by allowing for contact with pain, tiredness, and need for support, dear eights. In stress, as a leader, learn to practice empathy and compassion, particularly by sharing softer feelings with people you trust. So let yourself go a little. For the head, their destructive thoughts of power and invincibility are destructive. Their need for action can sometimes mean that eights don't stop to think things through as much as they should. So on the constructive side, under stress, eights are encouraged to collaborate more with others instead of taking on the work themselves, to be aware of the intensity and try to dial it back while slowing down long enough to think through responses, directives, and decisions. And we know this is true. Eights tend to speak off the cuff and what they're thinking immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand what this is saying. I'm not even an eight, but I know, if you know an eight, this may be resonating with you. They just can't help it. But if you witness an eight who's pausing and thinking, give them that feedback and let them know that probably not only helped the process, but also their stress level.
Absolutely. So kind of wrapping on that, what we really want leaders to know about managing stress is, again, starting with first and foremost, we all have it. This is not unique. What we've heard a lot about today, and we recommend it for all the numbers, is stay active and get outside. So it's not just about exercising always.
Yeah.
Nature plays a big part, to helping us constructively deal with stress. I mean, there's beauty in so many things, whether it's a natural piece of beauty or something that's constructed. It doesn't necessarily have to be nature. It could also be architecture. There's so many different ways we can look at it, but and the best part of it is free most of the time, unless, you're in a museum or something. But getting outside and getting outside of the workplace or your home is I think it's extremely important. I think finding things to invest your time in other than work, so friendships, playing sports, instrument, arts, find something you love that brings you joy to help relieve the stress. And maybe it's something new that you haven't tried before, I mean, maybe it's pickleball. Who knows? Like, that seems to help a lot of people these days. But really looking for ways to extend yourself in a way that helps you deal with stress. Many of our team members at DMA, I mean, we have folks that are giving up caffeine because they felt like it was causing them to feel stressful in an unnecessary manner, or it was accelerating stress that was already there and making it worse than it needed to be. And so that's, again, you have to look at your habits and things that you can adjust. Our point being is not everything has to be this monumental shift in order for you to effectively deal with your stress. I think that's critical to understanding stress, is that it is something we can control mostly and in a large part, but we have to be able to, again, identify it, understand more about it, and want to do something about it. And then I think so too, as leaders, it's imperative that we be a role model for healthy stress management instead of the destructive version. And I know that I was for so long. I was not healthy with the way that I dealt with stress because, quite frankly, I ignored it. And I was not empathetic to people who were experiencing it. And I know that for a fact. And I could chalk that up to being a Gen Xer. And it's like, I think you've said this multiple times, just pull up your big panties and move on with it. And I know that is not the case. Now, do we need to move forward? Yes. And, there's a lot built into that movement. However, not acknowledging stress is also so destructive. And so we want to make sure that as leaders, we understand ourselves enough to be able to identify it, manage it, and then to combat it. And because we need to be examples for others. And I think it's, again, it's part of our commitment, our service to those that we lead in whatever capacity that is, to work on our own stress so that we can be a role model that would ultimately help someone else.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Danelle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's transition to music moment. Gosh, man, I'm sorry, guys. I'm tongue-tied a little bit today.
Something that really helps me deal with stress is music. So this is fitting.
This is helpful. Yes. People liked, so we did, I think it was about 2 or 3 episodes prior to this one today, but I asked you some icebreaker questions and I got some feedback on that. People seem to like it. They like the spontaneity of it.
It was icebreaker questions relative to music.
Music.
Yes. Yeah, that was fun.
So,
it was fun.
So I thought I'd try that again. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Okay.
And I just want your quick response. Of course, again, I've had lots of time to think about it. So oopsie. Okay. So first and foremost, who's your favorite rapper?
Oh, I feel like that's a setup.
Okay.
I feel like that's a setup.
You know why?
You go
Because,
first.
So our mutual friend, Michelle, if you're listening to this right now, you're probably laughing in your car because Danelle just doesn't, and I know David knows this now too. She just does not listen to a lot of rap. I don't know where you were, like in the 90s, like how hip hop. It's Dallas, Texas. Yeah. I do not know.
I mean, I like if I'm going to listen to, or if I can reference anything relative to rap, it was the early days. So I would say Beastie Boys.
Okay, Beastie Boys is good. Yeah. Do you have I know your favorite song.
Well, yeah, because you've heard me try to get through. I love Paul Revere.
Yes.
Yes. So I do have one. That's my one rapper song.
Okay, well, I have multiple, so I'm going to go ahead and answer that question.
Okay.
And I mean, I just can't help it. Again, Gen Xers, Dr. Dre, I think is like the best rapper ever. Snoop Dogg, for obvious reasons. He, what rap song has he done that everybody didn't love? Today, my Gen Z son, who's 16, loves Kendrick Lamar, and I have grown to love him as well. So now I'm hip, I guess.
All right.
I'm hip to the kids. Okay, my next question is, name a song that makes you get up and dance. And this one was hard. Like when I'm thinking about you, when I'm writing these questions, I'm like, I really don't know the damn answer to this question. I don't know that I've ever seen you be like, ooh, I got to get out there. Never.
No, I mean, it happens with the country music, but like faster country music, because I like to, I don't know what that's called, but I like
two-step.
Well, two-step, but like with our arms stretched out, the stuff you and I do. We did it recently.
Arms stretch out, dancing.
No, like we're dancing together, but it's like I don't know.
Jitterbug.
Yeah,
or whatever.
See, what's the word for that?
Yeah.
Anyway, anybody who's listening and you're in dance and you need a descriptor, maybe we'll have Jesse put a meme out there. But this is what I'm talking about: is like when you're. What's that called?
I really don't know. It's just dancing is what it is, but it's dancing with a partner.
It is dancing with a partner.
And your partner round and round, and you do a turn and dip for next, and then you do this. It's like that.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so that's what I would think about dancing. Okay. And what about you? God, I don't like these questions. Okay.
Yes. Oh, well, that's why I asked them, because they were kind of hard for me to answer for you. But you know me, I'll get up, dance to any song.
Well, you're such a great dancer too.
Just put me out there. Like, just put me out there.
Mm-hmm.
But, disco, if I'm solo dancing, or anything Michael Jackson, or any of the Jacksons, like put anything Jackson family related, Janet, the Jackson 5, any of them. And I'm out. I'm done. I'm out on the dance floor. Okay.
Okay.
And then my favorite question of the 3.
Okay. I hope it's my favorite too.
I think it will be. What was your favorite song when you were in the 8th grade? Now, you're going to have to do some math.
Oh, okay. 8th grade would have been 1985.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. And we've talked about this before. I truly believe the 80s is the best decade of music for a number of reasons. All genres were popping, to include pop. Then we had funk. Like, we had so many good options, and country was just a great, and all the love songs and the hair bands.
I know.
But if I'm trying to think, 85, that 8th grade reminds me of school dances. And that was at an age where I was leaning into a little bit closer dancing. So the slow dance, and then I think of couple skating, because I was definitely going to the roller rink in the 8th grade. It's Wham.
Oh,
You know,
I
that's
love
what's in my head. It's like Careless Whisper. Like I used to love, and you know, I have a crush, and I'd
Did you
want to
date
dance,
Kate?
slow dance to that, to Careless Whisper, and then also Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. That has to be in the 85 era, but that's what I would think about when I'm thinking about 8th grade.
That time. Okay.
That time, yeah.
All right.
What about you?
Okay. I was in 8th in 1989.
Okay.
We lived in California.
Mm-hmm.
All that matters there, I didn't plan to say this, but I am going to say it. I lived in California on the east side of the bay, which means we were in the San Francisco area, but we were on the Oakland side.
Okay.
So there was a lot of beautiful hip hop. Maybe that's why I love hip hop so much. It's part of one of the reasons, because it was coming out of Oakland and it was coming out of LA. But if I have to think about, you remember the big deal with Milli Vanilli? You remember the band Milli Vanilli?
Well, first of all, the song "Blame It on the Rain." Yeah, I remember it because I thought it was awful. They lip sync.
Well, we didn't know that. That was my favorite song. Like I
did love them, and then I was just appalled.
Yeah, same. But I mean, whatever. I mean, I still love the music. So somebody wrote it.
Somebody did.
Celebrate them. I want to celebrate them.
No, but I felt like we lied to.
I mean, if you haven't listened to that in a minute, do it, because that is still holds up. And then my other favorite song, I'll never forget it, is Pictures of You by The Cure. And I think it followed a lot of different albums from The Cure that were released earlier in the 80s. But when Pictures of You came out, I was hooked, and I still love The Cure.
I know, you make us listen to it and our little hotel or travel concerts that we have. Yes.
I know, it's so good. And just one thing about The Cure, I saw them later. I saw them since I've lived in Dallas, which was probably not the same as seeing them in the 80s because everyone's much older. But the only word that the singer said other than singing the songs, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and Summer's going to kill me because she knows it. But it was, "Thank you." That's it. That's all he said. He didn't say anything else. Like, he didn't try to warm up the crowd.
Oh.
He would say, "Thank you."
You're saying that's all he said other than sing?
And then he'd go right into "Pictures of You." Yeah.
Oh,
and then he'd be like, "Thank you." And that was it.
He didn't say "Hello, Dallas" or
no, it's just
"This is my favorite song" or
it's just
"Sing along with me."
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, if our listeners like these icebreaker questions and my sad answers to them, then we'll pepper them throughout some episodes. But I'm not good on the struggle bus when it comes to these icebreakers. I've kind of been struggling.
I'll tailor them a little bit better.
No, these were good. Okay.
So I want to thank you, everybody, for coming and being with us today. And remember, we'll have links in the show notes. I'd like to also ask you, please tell a friend about our podcast. It could potentially help someone.
And I know that that's happening. We're getting so many, new listeners. Mm-hmm. And we can't express it enough, our gratitude for you sharing these, our content with others in your life. And again, we're all leaders when we make that decision. So we hope that it's the type of content that you'll want to share because it speaks to, others in your life. So
thank you for that. And we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.